You probably know that Matt Damon turned down the lead role in Avatar and lost out on a potential $250 million payday. But there was actually another A-list actor who rejected the movie to focus instead on a video game flop. James Cameron's Avatar turns 15 years old this week, so here are some things I bet you never knew about it. The story behind Avatar starts with two dreams, literal dreams, the ones you have when you're sleeping. In 1973, 19-year-old future director James Cameron had a dream about a bioluminescent forest full of fiber optic trees, fan lizards, a river with bioluminescent particles, and a purple moss that lit up when you stepped on it. He drew this image when he woke up, and it of course would become the basis of Pandora. The other dream was dreamt by James Cameron's mother, Shirley, even earlier than that. She once dreamt of a 12-foot tall, blue-skinned woman, and young Jim Cameron thought that was so cool. He pocketed the idea and saved it for a future project. As he told SFGate, quote, "In 1976 or 77, I was writing my first screenplay. A big science fiction story took place on multiple planets. At the end of the film was this planet with a native population that was 12 feet tall and blue and gorgeous." Cameron also said he was inspired by every single science fiction story he had read as a child, especially Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter and Tarzan, plus stories by Rudyard Kipling and H. Rider Haggard. James Cameron's favorite movies, 2001: A Space Odyssey and Lawrence of Arabia, were also big influences and reference points for Avatar. Basically, James Cameron had been forming the ideas for Avatar his entire life. His first attempt at making it came in 1978 with the sci-fi short film Xenogenesis. He later said that short served as the basis for many of the ideas and designs in Avatar. But it wasn't until 1994 that he finally started making Avatar for real. Cameron wrote an 80-page treatment for the film that year, with the story focusing on cultures clashing with civilizations. And he was inspired by similar stories being told at the time. Cameron later acknowledged that the movie shared themes with At Play in the Fields of the Lord, The Emerald Forest, Dances with Wolves, Ferngully, and Princess Mononoke. Cameron would line up Titanic as his next big project, but in 1996 he announced that Avatar would come after Titanic, and he said it would depict synthetic or computer-generated actors. He said it would cost $100 million, and its lead actors would, quote, "appear to be real, but do not exist in the physical world." The FX House Digital Domain even came on board that project for a supposed 1999 release. But then Cameron realized that the technology had not yet caught up with the story and his vision, so he decided to wait. He focused on documentaries for the next few years and further helped refine the special effects tech it would take to make Avatar. In the early aughts, we got believable CG characters in the form of Gollum, King Kong, and Davy Jones. And these convinced James Cameron the tech might finally be ready. Around 2005, 20th Century Fox fronted James Cameron $10 million to film a proof of concept clip for Avatar. The success of this camera test convinced Cameron to drop the other project he was working on, Battle Angel, which would eventually become the 2019 Robert Rodriguez movie, Alita: Battle Angel. In early 2006, Cameron got to work on the script and Na'vi culture. That year, he hired Paul Frommer, a linguist at USC, to create the Na'vi language. Frommer also created the Barsoomian language for Disney's John Carter movie. And he initially invented 1,000 words and a grammar system for Na'vi. But as of 2024, the Na'vi language now has more than 2,600 words. Between 2005 and 2007, James Cameron worked with a number of designers to create the Na'vi, including fantasy illustrator Wayne Barlow and concept artist Jordu Shell. Cameron felt that the 3D renderings of the Na'vi weren't yet capturing his vision, so he hired these designers to paint and build physical sculptures of the creatures. In July 2006, Cameron again announced the film and said he'd be shooting starting February 2007 with a hopeful release date of mid-2008. The movie, of course, wouldn't come out till December 2009. He then tapped Weta Digital to come on board for the film's extreme special effects requirements. Cameron hired two production designers, one to focus on the world of Pandora and another to design the human environments and their machines. The former team met with a professor of plant physiology at the University of California, Riverside to learn all they could about botany. China's karst limestone formation served as the inspiration for Pandora's Hallelujah Mountains, while the other production design team visited the Noble Clyde Bordeaux oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico. Also in 2006, Cameron announced he'd be using his own proprietary reality camera system to film the movie in 3D. This system had two high-def cameras in one body to create its sense of depth. But then suddenly, that very same year, Fox abruptly pulled its funding and decided not to produce the movie. It seems the studio was frustrated by James Cameron's penchant for cost overruns and production delays. So the director and his producing partner, John Landau, shopped Avatar around town, and they actually got some interest from Disney. But when Fox learned that Disney was interested, it had a change of heart. Fox exercised its right of first refusal and finally committed for real to making Avatar, but also only because it got Ingenious Media, a private investment firm, to fund more than half of the movie. Ironically, about a decade later, Disney would buy Fox and come to own Avatar anyway. A Fox exec told Cameron and Landau at the time, quote, "I don't know if we're crazier for letting you do this or if you're crazier for thinking you can do this." Reports vary on Avatar's budget. A studio rep told The Wrap it cost $237 million to produce, while other reports say the production budget was as high as $310 million. With a script, evolving technology, production designs, and funding in place, it was time to cast the movie. The most famous story about Avatar's casting is that Matt Damon was offered the lead role and 10% of the film's box office, but he turned it down because he was under contract to finish The Bourne Ultimatum. Had he taken the deal, he could have made $250 million. Chris Pratt and Chris Pine also auditioned, and Fox wanted Jake Gyllenhaal, but he turned it down to focus on The Prince of Persia. Cameron then went on a worldwide search for someone relatively unknown to keep the budget down. The three finalists were Channing Tatum, Chris Evans, and Sam Worthington. Worthington was living in his car at the time when he got cast in the role of Jake Sully. James Cameron loved that he hadn't been in a major movie yet because he'd give a quality that is really real. During Avatar's long development time, James Cameron initially wanted Charisma Carpenter to play Neytiri, but by the time the movie was getting made, she had aged out of the part. Koryanka Kilcher was considered for the role, and Emily Blunt also auditioned, but the part eventually went to Zoe Saldana. For Colonel Quatrich, Cameron first considered his frequent collaborator Michael Biehn, but then he remembered Stephen Lang, who had unsuccessfully auditioned for Aliens. James Cameron cast Michelle Rodriguez after seeing her in Girl Fight, and speaking of Aliens, Sigourney Weaver's character was initially named Shipley in the script at one point, but it was a good thing probably that James Cameron changed it to Augustine. Prior to filming, all the actors went through training for the various skills their characters would have, including archery, horseback riding, firearms use, and hand-to-hand combat. James Cameron also sent the cast on a trip to the Hawaiian tropical rainforest to get a feel for the forest before shooting on a soundstage. And they received language and dialect coaching from Fromer on the Na'vi language. And then 13 years after Cameron first wrote a treatment for Avatar, cameras began rolling in April 2007 on sound stages in Los Angeles and Wellington, New Zealand, the home of Weta. The motion capture stage used on Avatar was 6 times bigger than any previous stage. More than 1,000 people worked on the production of the film, and Avatar famously used a revolutionary mix of live-action footage, motion capture performances, and CGI. James Cameron said the movie is 40% live-action plus miniatures and 60% computer-generated. To execute the mocap performances, the actors wore individualized headgear with a tiny camera positioned at their face. The information those cameras were capturing was then transmitted live to computers for display and capture. But in addition to those cameras, numerous cameras were rolling at all times to give the digital artists multiple angles of every scene. James Cameron also invented a virtual camera system for the mocap production that used a game engine-like technology to display the actors' virtual counterparts in their digital environment in real time. So essentially, he was able to direct the all digitally animated sequences in real time with the actors there as if it was being shot in live action. James Cameron and the actors could also see how they were interacting with CGI environments and objects in real time, kind of like augmented reality. So all this gave them a lot of freedom to change things in the performance and environment on the fly. James Cameron invited Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Peter Jackson to try out this technology, and Spielberg compared it to digital makeup that allowed the director and the actors to work uninterrupted by things like sets and costumes and hair, much like black box theater. Due to James Cameron's personal views on the environment and climate change, only vegan food was served on the set of Avatar. By this point, Avatar had a release date of May 2009, but then during production it was delayed to allow more time for post-production and to give movie theaters time to install 3D projectors. Because of the massive amount of computing power and storage needed for the film, Microsoft invented a new cloud computing and digital asset management system called Gaia, specifically for the movie. To render the film, Weta used a 10,000 square foot server farm complete with 4,000 HP servers, 35,000 processor cores, and 104 terabytes of RAM. Pixar's RenderMan and Alfred systems were also used to help render the film, but still, it would often take several hours just to render a single frame. To get the movie done on time, a number of other special effects companies were brought on to help Weta, including ILM, which created the effects of the film's vehicles and created a new way to make CGI explosions. James Cameron and the post-production team worked on the film up until the very end. The final visual visual effects shots weren't completed until a month before the movie's release. For the score, James Cameron brought back his frequent collaborator James Horner, who composed Aliens and Titanic. Horner worked with Wanda Bryan, an ethnomusicologist, to create a unique musical sound for the Na'vi, and then fused it with traditional cinematic scoring styles. Horner said this was the hardest and biggest job he had ever been on, and would often work 18-hour days to get it done. Fox spent $150 million marketing Avatar. It showed 25 minutes of footage at San Diego Comic-Con in the summer before the film's release. Its initial teaser was one of the most watched online trailers at the time. The studio collaborated with Coca-Cola on Coke Zero cans that could interact with a custom-made AR website, and Avatar actor Joel David Moore was on the Fox show Bones at the time, so in an episode prior to the film's release, his character talked about how excited he was to see it. Some film pundits doubted whether Avatar would be a success, balking at the blue cat people and claiming it looked uncanny. But then on December 18th, 2009, Avatar opened on 3,450 screens in the US and Canada, 2,032 of which were 3D, and it grossed $77 million opening weekend, which was only seen as a modest success. But then, we all know what happened. It went on to become the biggest movie of all time. Within a record 19 days, it had broken the $1 billion mark worldwide, and then went on to gross $2.74 billion worldwide total, making it the first movie ever to break $2 billion at the box office. For a time, Avengers Endgame took its spot as the biggest movie ever, but then thanks to a re-release, Avatar took back the crown and now sits at $2.9 billion total. When you adjust for inflation, Avatar is the second biggest movie ever, behind Gone with the Wind. The Hollywood Reporter estimates that Avatar likely turned a profit of over $1 billion for Fox. And for all that, you can thank 3D, because the novel 3D experience plus the extra ticket fee that came with 3D were a key part of Avatar grossing so much money. Critics were mostly positive on the movie, but not unanimously so. Today, 81% of the 333 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive. When it hit home video, it broke launch day records, selling 1.5 million units. Avatar would go on to be nominated for 9 Oscars, winning 3: Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, and Best Visual Effects. And then something strange happened. Avatar kind of went away. Considering its enormous success, it didn't appear to have a comparative imprint on the culture. Critics and pundits wondered why it didn't have a Star Wars or Harry Potter-like fandom. Some even called it the forgotten blockbuster. And yet, over the next 13 years, Avatar would pop up occasionally in the culture. Cirque du Soleil staged an Avatar-themed show in Louisiana and London from 2015 to 2019. And Disney opened a massive Pandora Land at its Animal Kingdom theme park in Orlando in 2017. The Pandora Land was and is extremely popular. If you visited in its early years, there is no way you would think that Avatar was some forgotten blockbuster. And because of the movie's enormous success, Cameron and Fox, which later became Disney after the takeover, planned 4 sequels. Cameron laid out an ambitious plan for 4 total sequels, and maybe, possibly even more. But even then, some doubted whether the Avatar sequels would perform at the box office. Well, Avatar: The Way of Water took 13 years to get to the big screen and cost around $400 million to make, but it made $2.3 billion worldwide. And the next movie, Avatar: Fire and Ash, is heading for theaters in December 2025.